Hello, my name is Ben Fry. This is for EDU 503 Sports Law graduate course. Um, I chose to do um, an examination of the Behrman versus University of Notre Dame case. Um, Christina Behrman suffered a broken leg when she was knocked down by a drunk as she was returning to her car after a Notre Dame football game. Behrman and her husband sued the University of Notre Dame for damages resulting from that injury. Um, After the close of all the evidence, the trial court granted Notre Dame's motion for judgment on the evidence, and Behrman appealed, raising an issue of whether Notre Dame had a duty to protect Mrs. Behrman from injury caused by the acts of a third person. Um, the evidence most favorable to Mrs. Behrman in this situation um, was that Mrs. Behrman had left the game shortly before it ended, and as they were walking through a parking lot toward their car, they observed two men who appeared to be drunk. The men were fighting, one of them fell down, and then they walked away from each other. And then one of the men walked past the Behrmans, and a few moments later, the man fell into Mrs. Behrman from behind, knocking her to the ground and breaking her leg. Um, in that parking garage area where they were walking, there were no ushers or security people when the incident occurred. And Behrman's argument says that as a business invitee of the University of Notre Dame, um, the university itself owed her a duty to protect her from injury caused by the acts of that third person on the premises. Um, on the other hand, the University of Notre Dame argued that absent notice or knowledge of any particular danger to a patron, um, that they could not be held liable for the acts of the third person. It's evident that the conduct of a person will give um, rise to an action of negligence only if that person is owed a duty to the plaintiff to basically conform their actions to the standard of care. Um, it falls under the lawful duty to the lawful duty for the university to supervise and make sure that all of their patrons are safe. Generally, the operator of a place like a university football stadium, university in general, any sort of athletic facility, they owe a duty to keep the premises safe for all invitees, all fans, all students, all student athletes, whatever. Um, and that includes the duty to provide a safe and suitable means of entrance and exit, and a duty to exercise responsible or reasonable care to protect a patron from injury caused by another person the same way. Um, However, in Mrs. Behrman's case, she was arguing that as an invitee, she should be looked after, and this shouldn't have happened. Um, in this case, the inviter, which would be the university, is not the insurer of the invitee's safety um, because the liability doesn't fall under the inviter's responsibility. It falls on the university, the university's security group that is working the event. So while it does fall on the university, it doesn't directly fall on the inviter in this instance. Um, so it goes on and gives some language on the rule basically nullifying the inviter to make sure that they're not held liable. Um, Basically, calling them, someone or relating it to a situation where somebody has some land and they hold it open to the public for entry for a business purpose or something like that, and somebody gets hurt on that land or leaving that land by a person that was also in attendance, the person who owns that land may not necessarily be the guilty party or the liable party. It would fall under um, a different umbrella kind of thing. Um, so when it when all this information got presented, the university stated that they were aware that alcoholic beverages, are consumed on the premises um, prior to, during, and following football games, and they're also aware that tailgating does take place in the parking areas around the stadium, and even though there is no knowing of the particular dangers that individuals pose, there is the knowledge that as people become intoxicated, they pose a general threat to patrons. So while they don't exactly know the potential problems that one person could bring up, there is just a general overview of these are the things that could go wrong, and this falls under that category. Um, so with that, the University of Notre Dame is under a duty to take reasonable precautions to protect those who attend its games from injury caused by third persons. But in regards to whether the university's protective measures were adequate, I sorry, in regards to whether or not the university's protective measures were adequate or inadequate, um, to what contributed to Mrs. Behrman's injury is completely up to the jury in this case. Um, and they would use the information that was presented to them regarding um, the university being liable or individual people being liable. Um, this case was interesting because it's a situation that occurs frequently and can occur frequently, both at the collegiate and high school level. As an athletic administrator, your responsibility is not only to the safety of your coaches and athletes, but also to the people who attend your activities as spectators. That may mean planning for these types of situations, as well as hiring additional security, asking local law enforcement, first responders to just kind of patrol the area or help with um, crowd control, um, foot and vehicle traffic, or just general behavior of patrons, athletes, etc. It's better be safe than sorry in these cases because of situations that are completely out of your control. In this instance, Mrs. Behrman just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and there's very little that could have been done in that moment to assist her. Um, but now that that has happened, planning ahead and making sure that you have proper amounts of security personnel to ensure that everyone is as safe as possible at all times. Um, it's not to say that this couldn't happen again, but you're trying to minimize the risk of it happening again. So all in all, this case presented some interesting topics on who's held responsible in this kind of situation, and how it was handled, and how it uh, kind of associates with your role as an athletic administrator, is something that we have to deal with on a daily basis. Just making sure we are prepared for as much as possible, because you never know what somebody might be capable of in a given situation. So, thank you.